My first guest on the program this morning is Labor MP Ed Husic, joining us from our Sky News Centre. Ed Husic, thanks very much for your time. If we can begin on this income tax cut plan, obviously there's been all sorts of talk about the merits of it. Where do you sit, though, on the principle Labor should take? You've got the mandate the government has and Labor's long-held view on the tax cut.
I think we'll just work through the detail, frankly. You can quiz me about principles, but really the key test will be to see how the government structures this, how it's considered by our own caucus and obviously by our own leadership team.
When you say the key test for the government in structuring it, we know what they're going to do. It's up to Labor and what you think of how much voters supported this in the last election, isn't it?
Yeah, and we also have been witness to the things that government will, that the coalition will say versus the way the detail aligns with what's being proposed. And I think I would much rather wait and see that detail before committing to anything publicly, frankly.
What are we missing, though, in terms of detail on this tax cut?
Well, we have our own processes of going through these things, and we'll do that.
But in terms of the detail, I mean, the government has laid out its plan, hasn't it? And when things would start, what the tax cut is, who it applies to. And
we also have to see, as you have been able to witness in the last 24 to 48 hours, the way that the crossbench have been reacting to it. So, I want to also see what type of arrangements get discussed there and how that flows out into the public space. Too early.
You can make the crossbench irrelevant, though.
We'll see what shakes out in the next few weeks.
OK, we'll see what the leadership team, as you say, have to say in the caucus about it as well. What about press freedom? Because Labor has been saying, certainly initially, remember it's the government in charge right now, but what should Labor do when we're talking about your attitude? Labor's been there and helping pass various laws around security for the past 6 years, for example, and we've heard the bipartisan emphasis there.
I think this government tore up any agreement on bipartisanship last year. I mean, they can't be trusted on national security laws after spending 12 months or more telling us that encryption laws were important and had to be put through the parliament. In December, they failed to do just that. They failed to put its own laws on encryption through the parliament. Bill Shorten extended to them a commitment to pass the laws in December with a commitment to amend the laws as soon as parliament resumed. And we had a deal in December and a welching on that deal by February. So I think we, as a Labor Party, need to not necessarily prioritise bipartisanship as an end in itself. We should make sure we get the balance right between protecting people and protecting their rights, but we should not slavishly extend a commitment to bipartisanship to a coalition that doesn't have the same or doesn't value bipartisanship clearly in the same way.
So we're talking about a sort of change in attitude from Labor that previously you've worked. You've tended to get some amendments, but the default position has been, for more than 6 years now, passing the laws in the end. You're saying, let's not have that as the default, if you like.
I'm questioning whether or not this is a government that you can be bipartisan with on national security, because they are more committed to playing politics with these laws, as has been evidenced in the last 6 months or so on encryption, where they refused to actually amend their own encryption laws based on what a bipartisan parliamentary committee said should happen. They refused to do it. Matthias Cormann in December says, yes, we'll come back and we'll amend the laws, and then Peter Dutton says, no, we won't. So, how is it that we play bipartisanship with a group that is going to play politics with national security? Again, I think our value system should be founded on the notion that we get the balance right between protecting people and protecting people's rights. And I also think internally, as much as we're saying post-election that we should have a review of policies, I also think we need to have a review on style, the way we approach things. And I have to say that, we have a lot of room for improvement around consultation on national security laws to engage our caucus a lot better. And no one in the caucus will be surprised that I'm saying this publicly, because I've certainly said this privately.
So you're talking about this not just being up to the leadership team, the Shadow Attorney General, Shadow Cabinet, but caucus should have a say in national security laws, more of a say than it's getting?
Well, sensibly, you are going to have people make the final calls on things. So I don't think you will have a leadership group, you'll have shadow ministers that ultimately need to have a degree of latitude given the fluidity of, trying to get legislation through the Senate, and we totally understand that. But much earlier in the piece, being able to engage with caucus, being able to treat seriously the concerns that are raised and to be able to act on those, I think will be very important. And I certainly will be putting my voice to that view in the course of this parliamentary term, because again, these are very complex laws, and in terms of the encryption side of things, it's having an impact on tech firms here, where I'm getting reported to me about the way that it's creating doubt in the ability of tech firms to get business overseas. There's suggestions that some countries are thinking of offshoring their data because they can't trust the framework that we have here. If the US and the UK can get this right, why can't Australia do the same? And we seem to be standing one out on that and creating international concern on that process. If we make our primary view to be an effort on bipartisanship, we will also have to accept responsibility for when these dud laws start to become problematic in the public space, and you've seen some of that criticism extended to Labor already.
And as to what you should do, for example, about encryption, so does Labor have its own Senate review? Do you push for amendments regardless? What are you going to do about that when you say you have some of that bipartisan responsibility?
Well, it's not just about Labor, it's about what the Parliament said. I mean, across Parliament, the Joint Parliamentary Committee that brought in people from all political parties, or the bulk of political parties on that group, recommended 17 different changes to those laws, have also referred the laws to the Independent Security Legislation Monitor to review them further as well, saying that they do have issues with the way that these laws have been structured. It triggered nearly 200 different amendments that were supposed to be put to the laws themselves, and this hasn't happened. So, again, if the government wants bipartisanship, it should respect the bipartisan nature of recommendations put forward by the Parliament on these laws themselves.
And if not, Labor muscles up more. Can I take you to one other specific example? Laws passed last year that broaden the scope and stiffen penalties around secrets being divulged. Now, there was a protection pushed for around journalists that Labor did help push for, along with the crossbench that happened, but nothing for whistleblowers. Is that another example of a mistake?
I think the events of the last week should give us the opportunity to reconsider what additional measures should be in place to protect not just the press but whistleblowers. And I also hope that elements of the press too that have been affected in the last week do not necessarily interpret that just because you're questioning national security laws, the suggestion that you're soft on national security is ridiculous. And I think media outlets now need to see the important value of getting the balance right, as I said before, between protecting people and protecting their rights. And just because we give a set of press freedoms should not put the pressure or take the pressure off the press also ensuring that adequate and thorough scrutiny is given to the laws that are being put forward to ensure that we get that balance right. So if there are, for example, reforms that could be made to strengthen protections for whistleblowers and for the press in relation to reporting, and making sure that a better informed public is a more secure public, then we should examine that. At the same time, again, this is about balance. I don't think we should go all the one way. There is a need to have, obviously, confidentiality and secrecy around very sensitive issues, but, I think rightly people are starting to question what gets put or what gets hidden behind that curtain or that veil of secrecy, and is it legitimately held to be that? I think we should be ensuring that there is a balance between allowing security agencies to do their work effectively in protecting the Australian public, but not necessarily making such a huge grab of every scope of every element of information being deemed as secret and therefore denying the public the right to know about the way that government operates.
Does it go back as well beyond the past few years and the post-9/11 environment to, for example, what's been used in recent raids, the 1914 Crimes Act, and a need to look at protections there, so well back before contemporary politics?
Well, I think this is always the test for parliaments to ensure that the legal frameworks that underpin the way we do business or the way we behave in the community keep pace with developments, with modern times, that they're actually viable in the context of what has occurred. And obviously we do make those changes. I mean, the Crimes Act, by virtue of what it's dealing with, has had to be a bedrock, but it doesn't prevent you from being able to amend it from time to time to take into account these type of things. And particularly in an era where I think people are starting to get a lot more concerned about the impact of technology on their privacy and the way that their data is being used and the way that governments and business are using that data. And where do we establish the sort of red line, as it were, as to where we take action if that red line's been breached.
All right, a bit to mull over there. I might just get one final topic, if I can, on the fake news armistice that you've proposed. So I suppose Labor saying mea culpa on the Medi scare, but hang on, the death tax that the government was talking about was garbage as well. How does this work? Both party bosses come together and agree, for, I guess, new rules of engagement when you've got the new weapons of social media?
Can I just say, first off, I mean, I didn't say that, Labor has admitted a mea culpa or anything of the sort in relation to Medicare, though I do acknowledge that the Coalition had very firm views around where we campaigned on that. We obviously objected through the course of the campaign around issues concerning, the proposed death tax that was being circulated online and being pushed by some. And I think a question has to be raised about at what point do both parties go, this is going to corrode confidence in what major parties in particular are saying to the voting public. And I'm not saying we sign a formal agreement of sorts, but I think common sense should ultimately prevail, recognising that if we want to be taken seriously, we've got to treat the public seriously in the type of things that we put forward. Now, there's going to be clearly contention between the parties on these type of things, but I think common sense, as I said, can prevail.
Ed Husic, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good on you.